Hey, you Mavericks. We are excited to have Simon Parker, the founder of SP&P and founder/host of the Care Home Show in the UK, the leading and only video podcast for the elderly care home sector. It's amazing to have you as our first international guest on Challenging the Way We Age, Simon. So excited to talk to you.
Absolutely delighted to be here, folks. Really appreciate you having me on. It's lovely to be able to reciprocate, having had Francis on my podcast recently. So no, delighted to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I just want to give a little bit of background. So I connected to Simon on LinkedIn, which is turning out to be pretty powerful, and I was fortunate to be his first transatlantic guest on the Care Home Show, and you'll need to check that out. We'll put that information in the show notes to the site so they can go find out more about that, because you're doing some great things over there. And I talked to Kathy about our experience and some of the similarities, and we wanted to have him on our podcast to really bring out that connection between the UK and the States and the challenges that we're facing. And so we're really thrilled to share the knowledge and expertise of Simon with those that are listening in the States and possibly else in the world. And we truly believe he is the Maverick of the UK when it comes to care. And so we look forward to having an impactful discussion. And so, Simon, thank you again, and we're ready to learn more from you.
Superb. Well, I think there's certainly a lot to be learned from each other, but yeah, firstly, just thank you for having me on as a guest. It's really exciting to be on the receiving end of a podcast for the first time. That hasn't happened before.
Okay.
And to be on your podcast is a real pleasure. So yeah, no, thank you so much for having me.
Excited. So tell us a little bit about the Care Home Show and how you got into this industry.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, there's, as there usually is with these things, there's a bit of a story with how it all came to be, if you like. So I've had, I guess you'd call it kind of a lifelong fascination and appreciation for the older generation. So when I was born, between me being born and me being about 5 years old, my sister had to have numerous operations on her hip. Like if you think her ball and socket joint, for whatever reason, it didn't quite form properly. And that was quite stressful for a young family. So I was very lucky in the fact that my grandparents lived quite close. So I ended up spending an awful lot of time with my paternal grandparents off the back of that. And yeah, that has a big impact on your life. So when they got to a point, when my grandparents got to a point when they were kind of in need of care in whatever respect that kind of looked like, I got involved in that process. I tried to help out where I can. I spent an awful lot of time in kind of various different kind of care environments, or being around my grandparents when they were kind of the receiving care, if you like. And in doing so, you got to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, if you like. So the story that I tell is the fact that my both of my grandmothers were both called Olive, but they were very, very different. So my nanny Olive was a beautiful person. She was a hairdresser. She was a little bit crackers, a little bit out there, like in all the best ways possible. But she came from kind of a really, really humble background. And then my grandma Olive was quite well-to-do. She was the wife of a successful business owner. And yeah, because of that, their experience of care was very, very different. And I guess looking back on that, the biggest learning was the fact that not all of the best care necessarily came where at the kind of for my grandma Olive, because she was kind of more well off financially, and that was, I guess, that was an interesting learning even as a relatively young person. So being part of that process, or kind of looking in on it, if you like, and being involved in kind of some way, that had quite an impact on me. So for one reason or another, I ended up having spent a lot of time as a technology headhunter. I ended up looking at buying care home businesses in the UK. Now, the first couple of deals didn't come together for whatever reason. But
wait, just 1 second. You went from being a technology headhunter to buying homes to serve the elderly. How did that happen?
Okay, good question. So what happened was I spent quite a long time as a technology headhunter. So I'd imagine, Katherine, I would have probably helped organizations that you would have been aware of. So tech companies that wanted to land and expand into EMEA outside of America. So maybe they'd gone and got maybe Series B funding or C funding, and they're looking to kind of scale globally. I'd help put kind of a commercial guy into London or one of the big tech.
What a small world.
And then yeah, I'd end up I'd basically place their commercial team around them, which is good, and it paid well. But I don't know what your experience was, Katherine. Like it was good and it was challenging, but it never provided me with an emotional payoff for what I was doing, if that made sense. So I do a deal and it was great and it was fun. I got enjoyment out of it and kind of the financial benefit, which is great. Can't complain at that. But yeah, it was always lacking something for me. So I had a slightly unfortunate set of circumstances where I ended up working for a tech company. The company didn't end up doing quite as well as they'd hoped. And they ended up paying me quite a lot of money to disappear quietly, shall we say. So, yeah, despite the fact that I ended up doing my number and things like that, because I was working in a sales capacity in this role, they basically, they gave me some money to go away quietly. And I kind of thought to myself, well, I didn't really want to go back into tech. I had my fingers burnt, I guess, by kind of stepping into this sales role, which didn't quite come to fruition for the reasons that I explained. And I just thought, you know what, I need to go and do something different with my life. So I took a bit of time out and I realized that what I needed to do something that was important to me. And because of my experience as a child, I realized it had to do with something to do with older people. So that was what kind of set me on the path to start thinking, okay, so how can I do something that's maybe more purposeful and where I can add more value to the world, where obviously, don't get me wrong, I like getting paid, but I want to do something where I can contribute something more to society. So that was how that all came about.
That's really wonderful. And thanks for sharing that story. I think in today's world, there's a lot more of that than there used to be. It used to be very much, my generation was very much corporate, stay in your job. Your parents were kind of pressuring you to stay in the same job for a long time, get the benefits, things like that. But we still had the same feelings, like we really, really wanted to do something that had more meaning to us. But I think that your generation, and I look at you and Francis, and I think your generation, you're younger than I am by at least 10, 15, 20 years maybe on your end. I think that it's easier for you to do that if you have that calling. More people are willing to do it. And I think that's what one of the things we really need is some of the new, fresh ideas, right?
And I think too, is that we're getting to the point where we're realizing how global things really are and how connected we are. Obviously LinkedIn, we can chat very easily from across the pond, right? And begin to realize, wow, there's a connection here of like ideologies that maybe we need to foster and explore more. I mean, I think that's, what we're seeing is that there's pockets of people like you that want to do it a little bit better, different, make that positive change because of our personal connections to our grandparents or our parents. And that's, I think, a driving factor. I think we just see more kind of negative things in the world, that it's always nice if you can do a little good.
Yeah. So. One of our mantras is creating hope for the way we age. And that's what I hear in some of the things that you're talking about. It's the personal drive for you, but it's also the personal drive is born out of doing better for our older adults. We can do better, and we know we can do better. So we need to do better.
So
I completely agree. Sorry, Francis. No, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, your journey is awesome. So kind of what was that leap looking like? You said you took a little time off from your tech stuff. What was that kind of, how did it transition for you? What started it?
So I kind of went into, an introspective phase. I went and did some courses. I went and did some kind of soul searching and things like that. And I just looked at what did I feel was going to be the best route forward. And it had to be a leap of faith, all things being told, because I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. But it didn't take me too long to to fall in love with the sector, because by looking at different care homes, so a lot of the homes that we were looking at were owned by baby boomers who they tried very hard, but an awful lot of them were kind of stuck working in their business rather than on their business, and a lot of them didn't seem to be fulfilling ultimately their potential. And that was a really, really interesting learning for me. So and that's something that we're very, very cognizant of in what we do as an organization. But in doing that, I guess I got almost quite a unique insight into, because we looked at more than 100 care home businesses, all the way through to the ones that we got through to kind of final stage due diligence with, and kind of in between kind of a sales memorandum. So we looked at all of these various different homes, and by looking at that, we could see all of the challenges, and that was really how the consultancy services business was really, really born. Because one of the guys that was working with me, because I was a complete neophyte at this point, I just liked the idea of doing it because it felt like the right thing to do, albeit that's a slightly gung-ho approach. There's a chap called Rob who is one of my fantastic colleagues, who he'd spent his life working in care. He was actually born into care as a foster child, so he has spent his entire life kind of repaying his debt of gratitude to the older generation, if you like. We were looking at all these different homes, and he and I kind of came up with this idea of a model of executive coaching for the care home sector. So that was helping the leaders of care homes to address their biggest challenges and to try and help them to achieve whatever their kind of big, bold aspiration was for their future. And that was just how it all started. So since then, there's a team of 5 of us. We've got people kind of spread out all over the UK. We've rebranded. We've now started running a number of other services. So if people come to me and they say, "So Simon, what does SP&P do?" The response is, so SP&P is a professional services company specifically for the elderly care home sector. And we help our clients to achieve 3 things. We help them to build high performance teams. We help them to deliver outstanding care, because if you remember, that's the highest rating that you can achieve by the English regulator, and to accelerate the growth of their care home business. So people tend to come to us with kind of a big, bold vision of, hey, I want to be able to, I've got 6 care homes, I want to have 12, or I want to prepare my business for sale, or I want to leave a great legacy. I want to build a fantastic dementia care strategy. I want to just all of the stuff that one might aspire for within a care home business. We'll put a program in place basically to help them with that journey. So our vision as an organization is that sustainable care home businesses provide the best possible life experience for everyone that lives in, that works for, and that owns a care home or group. And everything that we do contributes towards making that vision a reality. Now, with a big, bold vision like that, we realized as an organization that we wanted to be able to try and help more people than just our clients, because we're a 5-person organization. We're a boutique, I guess you'd call us, but we wanted to be able to help more people. And I've always been a big fan of podcasts. There's you and your audience you must know the Joe Rogan Experience, one of the big America's podcasts. I watch that religiously. I just think it's fantastic. Joe Rogan, in my eyes, is an absolute hero. Having watched that for ages, I just thought, well, we're looking at a way that we can scalably help more people within the sector. We need to be able to do that in some form digitally. And about probably a year and a half ago, I decided that I wanted to do a podcast. Didn't just want to do a normal podcast, wanted to do a video podcast. I'm very lucky in the fact that my one of my friends is he's now one of my friends. He was just somebody that I knew at the time, but is a podcast extraordinaire. So he knows all about the production side of things as well. So,
that's awesome.
That's very convenient, albeit we didn't know each other particularly well. But again, he's a good pal of mine now. And I just explained to him what I wanted to be able to achieve. And then when was it? Kind of 4 or 5 months ago, we bit the bullet, got stuck in, and we've been pushing it hard ever since. So effectively, the Care Home Show is now a digital product of SP&P, and it just helps us to be able to go and share the message, the world view, the kind of positive reinforcement that we want to be able to share out there into the UK sector, and now I get to do it globally as well by speaking to you guys. So it's
That's
no,
right.
it's awesome. It's a real
Now
pleasure.
you're an international sensation now.
So I wanted to ask real quick for our American listeners, what is a care home? Just can you kind of describe that for our listeners?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So you would have, I guess the equivalent would be an assisted living facility. So in the UK, a care home will deliver 3 different types of care traditionally for older people, and that will be residential care, which is, to my understanding, that's the equivalent of assisted living. You can have dementia care, and then you can have nursing care, and then there's different homes will sometimes have kind of a mixture of those different homes within them. So I guess the British and the American kind of phraseology, if I'm talking about care homes generically, that will either be in the States, that would be either an assisted living facility or a nursing home.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So kind of what they do is almost like you do a continuing care retirement community where you have assisted dementia and then skilled nursing care in the U.S. And so that's what I think some of the bigger models are doing that here in the States. So that's interesting. And they're all on a single property? They all share space, or?
Typically, yeah. So, there's a range in here. So if you look at the kind of modern purpose-built care homes in the UK, typically they'll be across 2 floors. Typically they'll have about 60 beds. Wow. Typically they'll have kind of a small suite with kind of an ensuite and kind of a relatively small kind of living area. So you've got some space, and then kind of big open communal areas, usually a decent sized garden, hopefully, and obviously any kind of services type space that one might need, obviously, to deliver care.
I think in the US that would be comparable to our big brand names, right?
That's what, I mean, that would be comparable to our 60, 70, 80, 100 plus bed facilities. Yeah, exactly.
So have those as well. So we've got homes that are up to, I think the biggest one I've ever heard of was about 125 beds, but that's behemoth, and that would usually be one site split up with different buildings, but it's all in one location.
In the States, we've got one building that has 100 plus people in it. So
it sounds like you have a little bit smaller versions of some of our bigger brands.
Right.
And then do you also have people who have homes, actual physical homes that you would raise a family in, that you modify and turn into an assisted living or a memory care home?
Yeah, sure. So, yes, we do. Typically, they're being phased out. I think there's a big push for more modern, purpose-built type homes, but we have, I guess, what we'd call more traditional stock. If you were looking at it from kind of a property perspective, and those homes, let me put this in context. Okay, so if looking at the wider sustainability of the UK care home sector, banks will, at the moment, they tend to get less interested about homes that have maybe less than 30 beds, because they see their ability to be able to be sustainable into the future as being somewhat compromised because of their size and limited availability or access to economies of scale. So at the moment, there are quite a lot of smaller homes that are being phased out, maybe repurposed. That's specifically for older people, though. In younger people services, you can have a 6-person type home, but again, there's kind of nuances depending on kind of the type of people that the service provides their care to.
I just want to pop in for our listeners that, we love your video podcast. So as a reminder, it's called The Care Home Show. And we will put that link in our show notes so that they can go and listen and see some of the great things that you are trying to do and are doing over in the UK. So we've talked a little bit about it, right? How it works in the UK, the elder care. Tell us a little bit more as to what you're seeing in the market, like how things are shifting or the challenges that you're facing there.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So would it make sense to kind of put in context kind of a little bit about the UK UK market, just so the American audience kind of understands kind of the dynamics for it, and then maybe I'll explain some of the challenges that sit within that.
That sounds perfect.
Okay. We have an aging population. That's something that's going to transform really the world over the next kind of 15, 20 years. And that's something that's going to have a huge impact on all sorts of different things. So I think one thing that is big at the moment for various different reasons in the UK is that there's a big push for care to be delivered in people's own home. And that can be achieved either formally by an organisation or informally by family or kind of members of the community. Now, depending on the needs, wants, and desires of that person, that can be a great choice. And one of my episodes recently was with somebody who that runs a business called Hilton Nursing Partners, who they help people who maybe they've had a fall, they've ended up in hospital for whatever reason, but they provide an intense rehabilitation process in their own home, so that they don't have to move into a care facility of any type. Which, again, depending on the needs, wants, and desires, that can be exactly the right thing for people. But obviously, there are a huge amount of people that do end up living in some type of care facility because it's a requirement for them to do so, and that's the market that we serve. So,
let me ask you a question on that. So, in-home care, is that private pay, or is that something that the government subsidizes?
Sure. Really, really good question. So I'll come on to this probably in a little bit more detail. So in the UK, it would be widely recognized that we have a funding crisis. So if you have assets under a certain threshold, you will be the state effectively will pay for your care. Unfortunately, they don't provide anywhere near the level of funding required to actually look after a person in any real sense, which is a real big challenge for us. So privately funded domiciliary care, or home care as you might call it, is fine, and it's well funded because people just have to pay the set price that any provider might set. I have friends who run dom care businesses, and it's a tough market out there, and we have lots of businesses that are creaking because of the funding challenges. So it's not an easy business model to be successful in the UK. That's for sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No worries. So in the UK, we've got about 22,000 care homes who serve the vulnerable people within our communities. And I don't know what it's like in the States, but I'd imagine it's probably fairly similar in the fact that we have a massively fragmented market, where even the biggest groups in the UK who they might have maybe 300 homes around the country, they individually own probably no more than about 2% of the market share. Whilst at the other end of the scale, you've got a huge, and I do mean huge, amount of single care home operators out there, which make up the vast majority of the market. So, how does that compare to the States? Is that similar in some ways?
I think it's very similar. I think the largest provider has somewhere around 10,000 units, I think, maybe 15 now. But
sure,
on the grand scale of it, it's still very fragmented. It's almost region by region. And then there are a lot of single or double site operators that have maybe 60 total units. So sure, I think we're ripe for a disruption in this market in the US here of really challenging our build philosophy, all that stuff. We're ripe for someone to really come and sneak under the radar and have a huge impact that will rattle, I think, a lot of the bigger players that are currently, in the market right now.
It'd be this is maybe a podcast to have in the future, but one of the contentious issues in the UK is around scaling care home businesses and scaling them too quickly, potentially using the wrong types of unsustainable funding to be able to go and scale businesses. over leveraging with debt financing whilst trying to achieve scale. There's all sorts of problems that come with scale, but maybe that's a conversation for a podcast another day. But that's something that the operators in the UK have fallen foul of on a number of different occasions, and there are people who are kind of in the midst of that at the moment, who they've scaled in an unsustainable way, where one would hope that people haven't ended up suffering or not enjoying the best possible life experience, but equally one would expect that on some level their life experience has been compromised, and that's never a good thing. So
no, that's what we're in this for, is to provide better quality of life.
It goes back to what you said earlier, and about your two olives, which I think is, your two olives, is that you realize that all the wealth in the world might not guarantee the right quality or the great quality or outstanding care that you deserve. And just like financially, the lower end of the spectrum shouldn't automatically mean that you get the poor quality of care, right? It's coming up with solutions that no matter your wealth status, you deserve the same basic level outstanding care. And then, yes, you could do a la carte add-ons for those that are very wealthy, but we need to get to some baseline care that does not matter about their assets. Yeah, we must. Yeah, we have to.
I think that's one thing that if we were to walk away with one kind of one or maybe a handful of points of agreement, if you like, off the back of this, that's definitely something that both the UK, America, and kind of the rest of the world should just be striving for, because it's fair, right? That's what fairness looks like for people. When people have spent their life contributing, they deserve to be the beneficiaries of a requisite level of care, and that looks like a decent life experience. That looks like choices. That looks like fulfillment. Because when people have spent the rest of their lives doing that stuff, why should that stop just because they're in the later years of their life? So.
Well said.
You made a mention of the CQC, the Care Quality Commission. Could you dive a little bit deeper and kind of explain how that is and what that I guess commission does?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so so it's the CQC, so the Care Quality Commission. So that's the regulator just in England, in Ireland, in Wales, and in Scotland. They have different regulators as well. Me being in England, I've got kind of most of my exposure, if you like, is to the CQC. And they almost have like a RAG rating system, where they have, or a traffic light system, if you like. So their worst rating is inadequate, and that looks like a kind of a red dot. Their second worst is requires improvement, which is an orange dot. Their kind of middle of the road doing okay dot is a green dot, and then the best dot is the outstanding dot, and it looks like a little star. So that's the kind of the rating system. So the CQC, they review 5 different areas. The first question that they ask is the service safe? The second question that they ask is, are they effective? So are the team effective? Third question they ask is, are the team caring? The fourth question that they ask is, are the team responsive to the client's needs? And is the team well led?
Wow.
Okay.
So if you imagine, if you overlay that traffic light system across those 5 planes, ultimately those are the questions that the CQC are looking to ask. And what they'll do within that is they've got a system called the CLOEs, which is the key lines of inquiry. So each one of those 5 sections has a number of subsections, and they will ask themselves, they will ask the operator questions around those key lines of inquiry. So each one of those sections has quite a number of different key lines of inquiry. So undergoing that process, usually what will happen, so if you've got an average size service, maybe of 60 or 70 beds, you might have anywhere between 4 and 6 inspectors that will come to a home. And usually they'll stay around for maybe 2 days. If they've got problems, then they'll stick around for longer, and they'll scratch deeper under the surface. And that tends to happen around, I'd say on average, between about 12 months to about 18 months.
Better we get now. Yeah, that's good.
if you've got an outstanding home, it could be anywhere 2.5 years before you get re-inspected. And then if you've got a home that's experiencing difficulties of whatever reason, it could be anywhere between maybe 4 to 6 months, because they're obviously keeping a closer eye on you. So one of my friends, I think his last inspection, he's just been inspected recently, and I think his last inspection was in April 2017, but he's got an outstanding home. So he's kind of in a position where they're giving him headroom because they know he's doing a good job.
That's a little lower priority for them, but it sounds like they do want the ones that are rated a little bit lower to solve their problems pretty quickly, so they stay on top of them.
If you're to get a requires improvement, or specifically an inadequate, if that happens across 2 inspections, they will start coming down very, very hard on you. And they have the ability to close a service if it's not up to scratch. And they do that quite a lot. So the great thing is, so proportionately, I think as a country, we tend to do very, very well. So I think if I remember correctly, the stat is at least 84% of homes in the UK have a good CQC rating overall. And I think around 3% are outstanding, and that number's on the rise as well, which I think is really, really cool.
That's great. I mean, it goes back to just straight business. What gets measured gets improved.
Right. But what I loved about these questions, though, they weren't so much questions about policy procedures. Yes, it's important, but they're actually asking questions. Is it safe? Is it effective? Is it caring? Is the team responsive? Are they well led? These are like personal engagement things. These aren't just, let me see your policy and procedures and review those, right? I like this way of asking questions versus what they do in the US, at least in Colorado. They want to see your policy procedures. They want to see the paper file or the electronic file, and they go that way. They don't.
So it's about the person. Is that what you're saying? It's really about the care being provided.
Correct. I think we want to get there, but this approach, I'd love to do more research in it because I find this very interesting. So
I would say, so within the key lines of inquiry, they will go deep into policies, procedures, systems, processes, all of that type of stuff. But because it's done on a basis where people are actively within the homes, they get an understanding of probably some of the more intangibles. So if you get an inspection, you'll get a quantitative report in as much as you'll get a score, whether you're outstanding, good, requires improvement, or inadequate across the board, because you could get a mixture, obviously. Each one of those will then be rated on the traffic light system, but then quite a lot of information is then detailed from a qualitative basis, basically detailing the inspector's interpretation of what's going on within the home. So you've got a good balance of those two worlds, the kind of more specific data-led response, so that they can quantify their findings, but then it's also done in quite you're able to understand the narrative of what's going on in the home. What's interesting about that, and it'd be interesting to hear more about how it works in the States, but so all of the inspections, it is a legal requirement. If you have a website, which obviously most care homes do, it's a legal requirement to have your CQC inspection available on your website for people to download in its entirety. It's also a legal requirement for you to have in the front entrance hall. You need to show people what your inspection report is. Sorry, my lights have just gone out. Bear with me 1 second.
That's awesome.
The great thing, because I'm sat at my lawyer's office this evening.
That's funny.
They've got these eco lights, so they've they obviously turn off every now and then. But
you've been sitting still for too long.
Yes,
they basically have been sitting still for too long. I'll be on a train as well late this evening, so I definitely think I need to go for a run tomorrow morning.
Yeah,
no kidding. It's perfect for Halloween because your background there is like a little bit of looks like a spider web, and when you got up and it was dark, there was just this little spider web.
So let's dive back into about the CQC reports, and then I'll link back in for the States, because we don't have to do that in States at all.
Sure.
So Go ahead. Yeah, link that back in, because that's really cool.
Yeah. Okay. So if you don't show if in your front reception you don't have your CQC inspection, that would be considered a breach, and you would be marked down from an inspection perspective. I think it's illegal. Yeah, there's a legal expectation for you to do that. So if you walk into a home, I guess you've got from a new client or family member perspective, when you go and explore a home, 9 times out of 10 you probably will know the CQC inspection already. But if you don't, if it's just maybe a footfall walk-in type scenario, you want to know whether it's a decent facility or not, and whether people are being properly looked after. So, and that funnily enough, there's a direct correlation in between the homes that do really, really well and the ones that have the best CQC rating.
Wow. So
no surprise.
Yeah, no surprise at all. So what's the biggest challenges you're facing right now? We have staffing issues in the States as one of our big issues. Yeah. I'm assuming you have the same workforce crisis as well, but what else is out there that's a challenge for you, or in the UK, I should say?
Okay, so I'll touch upon the recruitment and retention side of things, because I think that's really, really important. So largely as a sector, if you ask the community, if you like, they'd say that one of their biggest challenges is recruitment and retention. And it's very widely documented in the mainstream media, and then also in the sector media as well. Now, I agree very much that this is the problem, but this isn't the cause of the problem. I'm very much of the opinion that if you're going to try and fix a problem, you need to fix the cause of the problem, because if you don't, then the problem's just not going to go away. It's going to keep on rearing its ugly head as such. So it's my opinion personally that nationally we have a cultural issue, and that's around how we perceive the care sector. This is often compounded by the mainstream media creating sensationalized headlines around what goes on in care homes. That's not to understate the fact that some terrible things do happen in care homes, but it's absolutely in the minority, and you can't understate the fact that we can't let those types of things happen, and that we must learn from those experiences and strive to make sure that they're completely eradicated to the best extent that we can do. But largely the sector it's a great sector, and people do genuinely care. So having the mainstream media lambast, tar everyone with the same brush, and alter the public perception, I think is really, really negative. And I think that makes people more conscious about entering in, because they think it's just going to be bandit country, quite frankly. So that's bad. And then I think culturally we have a challenge around the actual care homes themselves. So care homes need to have a culture where they're empowering their team and providing their team with purpose, so they know the direction of travel that the organization's going in, and that they've got an operating system for their people, so they know how to show up on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's in my humble opinion, I think that building a high performance culture is the most undervalued opportunity for businesses as a whole, everywhere, literally, and most for, if not most for the care sector. Now, in the UK and in England rather, part of that well-led part of the CQC's inspection focuses on culture. It talks about the vision of the organization. It talks about the values. It talks about the behaviors of the team. So not least because it's a massive business opportunity, because it will enable enable great things to happen within your organization. Actually, you know what, the regulator focuses on that really, really heavily as well. And you're never going to get a great CQC inspection, whether that be good or outstanding, if you're not focusing on building a high performance culture within your organization. So that's it's one of my soapbox subjects. I could probably sit and talk about this all day. I quite frequently do. But that's, so the recruitment and retention issue is that's the problem that people talk about. I think the conversation that we need to be having is, okay, culturally, again, that's as a nation, and then culturally within these organizations, what can we do to shift that perception so that we have a more positive outlook on supporting older people and people living with dementia? And that comes back to the title of your podcast quite nicely, challenging the way that we age.
Very much so. And we're actually interviewing in a couple weeks here some folks who have started a movement called Changing the Narrative. And it started
Okay.
here in Colorado, and it's all
Oh, wow,
about
okay.
changing the way we talk about older people. So really not using the word senior, elder, things like that. But really they've already had international exposure with it. And it was a small group that started here in Colorado. So.
And then we're also going to be diving into the Eden alternative as well, too. Have you heard of that at all? Because it's a pretty big movement that's been going on for a while, started by Dr. Thomas, correct? Dr. Bill Thomas.
Yep.
And something along that same idea of this idea of culture disruption of the status quo.
Okay. No, that's really
you have to check more into. You have to check more into that.
Definitely. It kind of rings a bell. It may be that there's another organization in the UK that's called Eden, or maybe it's the same one. But
it should be the same.
It's probably the same if it's the Eden alternative. And there's a book that we'll also put in the show notes that was written by the CEO of the Eden alternative, the current CEO. Her name is Jill Vitale Awesome.
Okay.
And what an amazing name, right? And
it's a cool book.
And it's about breaking the status quo. And really, I encourage all of our listeners to read it because I think it's really, really valuable.
And we'll also put that link in our show notes to Amazon, so you can link on that to purchase the book as well too. So
yeah, I'm a big fan of that. So one of our this is probably one of the points that me and Francis connected on when we originally spoke. What would that have been? Maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month ago now. And one of our values as an organization is to be disruptive, and that's not being disruptive for disruptive sake. Disruptive sake, that's challenging the status quo, that's asking the big questions, that's looking for opportunities to be able to go and improve. So that sounds like my kind of book.
Yes. Yeah.
So what do you want to challenge for the elders? What's the
that's I think that's really, really important question for all of us to ask, and thank you for asking me it. I think the biggest thing really is choice. I want older people and people living with dementia to be able to live their lives in the most fulfilling way that it's possible, wherever they are in their life's journey. Because I mentioned this earlier, but people spend their entire life going around kind of making choices around what they want to do, how they want to spend their time. Why should that not be the case just because they're later on in their life? So if there's one single thing that I could change, it would to be trying to create a world where older people and people living with dementia are in a world of choice and fulfillment and purpose.
I love that. So that's the world that you see that you're working to create right now. I absolutely love that.
It's important.
So what do you think the Americans and the British can learn from each other here?
Loads.
I know it's a whole big topic, and we'll have many more podcasts on it, I'm sure. But what's your initial thought?
Okay, so firstly, there's a part of me that kind of almost doesn't know where to start with this, because it's a big and expansive question. I think just before I go into that, I think one of the things that I'm really happy about is the fact that we plan to do a series together. The fact that we can put our heads together in kind of hopefully a relatively frequent basis, just to continue this conversation, so that we can start really understanding each other's respective markets, so that we can find out what those big opportunities to learn are going to be. I think really for me it's around best practice, because there's going to be incredible things that you guys are going to be doing that we wouldn't have even thought of, or maybe that we're trying and that we're kind of less developed in our learnings and things, and then simply also as well vice versa. So I think this is a conversation that we need to continue having. I think we need to be able to make sure that we create an environment for effective discourse between us, so that we can look at the opportunities, because that's what we're looking at here, isn't it? It's opportunities to learn from. One of the big things that I talk about an awful lot is creating an ongoing cycle of improvement. So it doesn't matter where you are in your journey, you just need to be keep continuing to push for improvements, like in a virtuous cycle. We get people who I had I have had a number of people kind of say to me, well, Simon, why would I want to aim for an outstanding CQC inspection when there's only one way and it's down? Maybe it's a bit of a poison chalice. And I kind of the only way that I can respond to that is to kind of say, look, yeah, okay, so it's going to be hard to be able to maintain that, but running a care home business, that's not easy anyway. What you need to be looking for is those constant opportunities to be able to achieve, because it's not, okay, so yes, if you achieve outstanding, that has a certain amount of definition in that it's finite to where you can achieve that. That doesn't mean that the quality of your service has to stagnate and to flatten off. That just means that you've achieved what the regulator expects. Let's go 5, 10, 20% over and above what the regulator expects. Then that way you're always going to get an outstanding CQC inspection, and you're going to continue improving the lives of the people that you're working with, not just the residents of the home, but then also the people, the team that you're working with as well. Because it's so much more exciting working for an outstanding organization that it is that's one that's just good. I don't want to underplay good, but there's a big difference between good and outstanding, and that feels a certain way.
That's great.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I think too, is it's almost striving. I mean, yes, it's hard to keep the outstanding rating, but why strive for that middle of the road when our seniors deserve more? Our seniors deserve us pushing ourselves, challenging ourselves to just do things better or improve constantly. Every day we need to be figuring out, what can I challenge as a person to make myself better, and then also my organization better. That's what we have to begin, not, in the States, I think we're too complacent. In the States, I feel like we are too complacent with our care model.
I think we're a little afraid of pushing the envelope too much. And I'm not sure why, but that's something that we need to do. And when I think about this, I have a lot of friends in the UK. I have a lot of friends, American friends, who are married to people from the UK. So this is going to be really important for them to be able to learn and understand what the care model looks like over there, because they have in-laws over there, or maybe they moved from the UK here to be with their spouse. So they're, just seeing the difference in the two models. And then, you throw in Australia there. I have friends who are married to some Aussies and some Kiwis. And so just understanding all these different care models is really valuable, because we have nothing bad that comes from that. Everything that comes from learning about each other's care models only helps serve to push us all to be better and better and better wherever you are.
Yeah, definitely. Like if cumulatively as a collective, if we can help raise the dial just a little bit, then that's a job well done. Obviously we want to raise the bar a lot, but any improvement's going to be good improvement, isn't it? And if we can do that again on a global basis, which is crazy exciting, just the fact that we're having a pan-Atlantic podcast. Hopefully this is going to be the first of many. And you mentioned other countries that have similar care models. There are a few other people that I'm in discussions with from other parts of the world as well, who are involved in care in some capacity. And hopefully I'll have the opportunity to be able to go and discuss things with other people from other parts of the world as well. So again, I think there's a movement that seems to be accumulating and building ahead of steam, where people are looking for collaboration. It's certainly happening in the UK. I get the pleasure of spending an awful lot of time with people who are really, really pushing to break down some of those silos, to be able to share best practice, so that we can have these opportunities that are widely available to everyone. And in some ways, we get to be a conduit to that as running a podcast. We can be part of that, to be able to go and share those ideas. I don't tend to do an awful lot of talking on our podcast, so this is rare for me, although I probably do a bit too much talking usually in my day-to-day life. As my fiance will attest. But yeah, just sitting down with people who have immense experience, decades of experience within the sector, being able to share their stories and their opportunities and their perspectives and their insights. It's a pleasure, but it serves a wider purpose for helping raise the bar. So it
does.
The fact that you guys are on a similar journey as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's a global issue. And I didn't mean to leave Asia out of this either, because they have a lot that they're dealing with, and we can learn a lot from them. So if you were to give one piece of advice to someone looking to make a positive impact on older people, what would that be?
This is a great question, and this is something that I actually think about quite a lot. Just because I think it's well, firstly, I ask everyone on my podcast this question because I think
yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Again, it's nice to be on the receiving end of this, but no, I think this isn't just for people in the care sector. I think this is kind of an agnostic piece of advice, but I think it's super applicable to people in the care sector. So I think the biggest superpower that any human can have is getting to know themselves. Because I believe that once you understand yourself and it enables you to be more capable of understanding the world around you. I think once you understand the world around you better, you can look for other people who have a similar world view to you. And I think once you're able to surround yourself with other people who have a similar view to you, then you can start to move mountains. So being able to work with other like-minded people where you've got a shared cause, a clear intent, a clear vision, and people who have similar values to you, that's what's going to make a difference in the world, whether that be care, whether that be anything else that you're interested in. But yeah, get to know yourself, and that's going to help you to make the world a better place.
That's really powerful.
Yeah, that is something that that's gonna stay with me for a while, because that is looking at it in that perspective is fantastic, because you're building the team around you essentially that's going to help you tackle that challenge and tackle that and move that mountain. And I think, especially in America, we try to do some things too often by ourselves, maybe a little too much. And then we bring that team in after we're either burned out or after we're tired or after we're almost at our breaking point. And then at that point, you realize when you surround yourself by the right people, things can happen and happen quickly. And and I'll use Kathy and I's example when we came up with this, brainstorm back in July, and now we're in October, and we've already done, I think, 12 episodes and Facebook Lives and things like that. So you find that right connection that you really gel with and mesh with, you can move huge positive impact.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
I love that. That's going to stick with me. I'm going to make that your quote. So I'm putting that on my Facebook page.
Cut that one out as a snippet. I think that's an important one.
I'm really glad that you enjoy it. Again, I think that's super important. So yeah, no, it's something that I think people, the more people that are cognizant of that, and that's a journey, right? It's not like that's not a finite thing. Like, we evolve as human beings. That should be a kind of a constant journey of exploration for us all, so that we can keep pushing to improve whatever our kind of purpose or mission is going to be for ourselves and for the people that we choose to be with.
And one of the things I appreciate about that is you started with, you need to know yourself, understand who you are and what your skills are, where you shine, and not try to be all things, but to really understand your motives, because that's where you can make the biggest difference. And that's where the pull is going to be for you. So what's what's the best piece of advice you have been given personally?
Okay, so I'm genuinely blessed in the fact that I've had an opportunity to spend some time with some very inspirational people, some great mentors and people who have had a really positive influence on me. Because of that, I can't actually answer that with one single question. Or one single piece of advice. So I'll give you my top three, and there's probably a load of other ones that we could talk about. But my top three. So my dad taught me that if you don't ask, you don't get. Anyone that knows me that will know that I'm the most probably tenacious and pedantic person when it comes to getting things done and making things happen. Probably annoyingly so for some people, but that's pretty well deep rooted into me. My mum taught me how to be stoic and how to deal with difficult situations. So keeping a level head when things are tough. Life's hard. Like the people that get ahead in life are the people that take ownership for what's for themselves and what's going on around them. And I think that requires a certain level of stoicism. And then my primary school teacher, Mrs. Howe, bless her, told me that there was no such word as can't, and that's something that stuck with me forever. So you probably can't see from here, but I get goosebumps when I think about those things. It's something that's built at the fabric of who I am as a person. So yeah, no, those are three things that if I could try and instill three messages into people rather than just one, I'd say that those would be pretty valuable.
Those are fantastic. And your mom and your dad instilled some really great values in you. And so did Mrs. Howe.
Legend, Mrs. Howe. Yeah, she's a fantastic human being.
That's awesome.
Wonderful.
That's
and,
so cool.
And boy, you don't ask, you don't get is really important. And I think that's a quality that you need to have if you're really out to change the world. And that's what the three of us and many more are out to do.
And I think too, it's a great statement for our seniors, is letting them challenge what they currently are. They don't have to accept the status quo. We need more input from them challenging us as operators, owners, providers, whatever facet we are in aging services. We need them to ask us so that they get what they want.
And what they need. Yeah.
Comes back to that choice thing, doesn't it?
Totally comes back to choice. Totally.
Exactly. One of my episodes that I did recently was with a lady called Caroline Baker, who's a leading authority in dementia care in the UK. She works for one of the best bigger providers in the UK called Barchester Healthcare, and because of her area of expertise, we did an episode largely on dementia care with my colleague, a lady called Sue Goldsmith, who's our in-house dementia care expert. So those guys used to work together in a previous life. And one of the things that Caroline said to me is, what we need to do is we need to spend more time listening to the dementia care experts. And that's not the people that have got a PhD. That's not the people that have spent loads of time in the care homes. It's people living with dementia themselves. And I think that was quite a profound thing for somebody to say on the podcast. I'd heard Caroline say it before, but I think I had people messaging me afterwards kind of say that really impacted my thinking with a lot of that. So yeah, that's a real good example of trying to create an environment, I guess, of where it's okay for you to ask and for you to get, because we need to understand the needs, wants, desires of the people that we're looking after to make sure that they enjoy the best possible life experience. And that's part of the purpose of why we get up in the morning, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. And that really it flips thinking on its head, which is what we're all about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We obviously could keep talking for probably hours, if not days. But obviously, we have to continue this conversation both through, through our podcast episodes, but probably definitely offline to create, really figure out what this challenge and movement and vision could be for us globally to have these conversations. And so, how can people get connected with you, Simon? How can they find you, reach out to you? What are ways we can connect?
Yeah. So LinkedIn, I'm pretty big on LinkedIn. So if you search Simon Parker, that's where I share most of my content. I'm quite active on there. I'm not particularly big on the other social channels, just because I tend to go all in on things. But we're hoping to get like a social media manager to help us go and transcend all of the different social media platforms. But no, if you'd like to be able to connect, then yeah. Simon Parker on LinkedIn. You'll see founding partner of SP&P and host of the Care Home Show on there, because I think there's about 34 different Simon Parkers in the UK, or at least that's what LinkedIn told me recently. And then www.spandp.co.uk. That's our company website if you're interested to find out kind of more about what we do as an organisation.
Great. And we'll post that in the show notes as well, so people have a link directly to you.
Yes.
Simon, such a pleasure to meet you. So excited for where we go from here together.
Yeah,
this was, as always, a fantastic experience.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Well, pleasure's all mine, guys. Honestly, this is a conversation that we're at the tip of the iceberg, right? This is we will create plenty more episodes in the future. You never know, there might have to be some transatlantic kind of us coming and doing a UK podcast in the States or vice versa in the future as well, which would be great fun. But we can look at that down the line. But ultimately, what we've found here is we found an opportunity for us to work together in collaboration to achieve our kind of cumulative shared intent and vision. And I think that's really, really powerful. So I'm super excited for this to be the beginning of the journey.
Yes, so are we. Thank you, Simon. Have a great evening and safe travels.
Thank you, Simon.
You're absolutely very welcome. Thanks so much, guys. Cheers for your time.
Cheers.